When you picture paradise, you probably picture the Maldives, right? We're talking stunning white sand beaches, these incredible turquoise lagoons. It's like a string of jewels just floating in the Indian Ocean. But here's the thing, that paradise is in a desperate race against the rising tide, a race for its very existence. So let's dive right into the incredible fight for the future of the Maldives.
And look, this isn't some distant sci-fi plot. That's a direct quote, a stark warning from the nation's own president on the world stage. It just immediately puts everything into perspective. This isn't just an environmental issue. It's an imminent existential threat to an entire country and its people.
And this is the number that really drives that warning home: 80%. That means the huge majority of the entire country is perched just a few feet above the water. It makes the Maldives one of the most low-lying and one of the most physically vulnerable nations on the entire planet. So how did it get this bad? Well, to really get what's happening, we've got to look at the diagnosis first. Let's break down the science, the actual data that shows why the ocean is rising and why it's happening so alarmingly fast right here. As you can see from this timeline, this problem has just exploded in recent decades. For centuries, things were pretty stable. But then, after the 1950s, everything starts to accelerate. You get these almost symbolic moments of desperation, like that famous underwater cabinet meeting back in 2009, all leading up to that blunt warning in 2021, and now it's being made even worse by all the extreme weather we're seeing.
Now, this is absolutely crucial to understand. The Maldives isn't just dealing with the global average problem. Oh no. The data from their capital city shows that the sea level there is rising more than twice as fast as the rest of the world. It's because of this perfect storm of local factors. Ocean currents are basically pushing more water towards them, and the tallest themselves are naturally sinking ever so slightly. It's like their crisis is on fast forward.
And when we look to the future, well, the projections are pretty sobering. Even in the best-case, low-emissions scenario, we're still looking at about half a meter of rise. That would be devastating. In a high-emissions world, it's over a meter. And then you have the real wild card. If the Antarctic ice sheet becomes unstable, you could add another meter, maybe even 2 on top of that. The takeaway here is that the future of the Maldives isn't really in their hands. It totally depends on what the rest of us do right now.
Okay, but the story is actually way more complicated than just islands slipping under the waves like Atlantis. The real immediate threat is that the islands will become unlivable long before they're completely underwater. Let's look at what starts to break down beyond the actual waterline.
It's truly a domino effect. As the sea rises, it just chews away at the coastlines. At the same time, salt water creeps into the ground and poisons the fresh water that people need to drink. Storms get stronger, and the island's natural protection, their coral reefs, are dying off, leaving them totally exposed. All this leads to things like airports flooding and even new health crises. It all falls apart piece by piece. And of course, that hits the economy hard. The two things the Maldives is built on, tourism, which obviously needs those beaches and reefs, and fishing, which needs a healthy ocean, are directly in the line of fire. When your environment collapses, your economy is right behind it. Now, faced with all of this, the Maldives is not just sitting back and waiting. No way. They are fighting back, undertaking one of the most ambitious and frankly desperate engineering battles on the entire planet. They're trying to literally build their way to safety. So they've got this multi-part strategy. First, they're literally building new land, creating artificial islands that are higher and safer. Second, they're fortifying their most important cities with massive seawalls. Third, they're thinking way outside the box with concepts like a completely floating city designed to just rise with the sea. And fourth, they're fighting politically, pushing for carbon neutrality and pleading for international help. But here's the overwhelming math. For all these incredible efforts, the scale of the problem is just immense. The new land they're building is just a tiny fraction of what's at risk. The cost of all this? A staggering quarter of their entire national GDP. Imagine the US having to spend over $5 trillion every year just on climate defense. And those seawalls, they can only protect a few key places, not the hundreds of other inhabited islands. So this all brings us to the reality check. It's the central question we have to ask. When we talk about a country like the Maldives disappearing, what are we actually talking about? And it's important to acknowledge there is a counter-argument. Some science suggests that atolls aren't just static things. They can actually grow taller over time as sand and coral build up. So it's possible they could keep pace with a slower rate of sea level rise. Not every single island might physically vanish.
But, and this is a huge but, just focusing on that misses the real point.
Because the true threat here is uninhabitability. A nation disappears when its people simply can't live there anymore. It's gone when the fresh water runs out, when the economy implodes, when airports and hospitals can't function. It's not a sudden plunge into the ocean. It's a slow, systemic collapse that makes life impossible. And that leaves us with this final, critical question. Can a nation really engineer its way out of a crisis that it did almost nothing to cause? Or is the fate of the Maldives and other countries just like it a global responsibility that rests on the shoulders of every other nation? The answer to that is going to define not just the future of these islands, but the kind of world we all want to live in.